Welcome to the Precise Multisport podcast, where we dive deep into the world of endurance sports, training strategies, and the mindset that fuels peak performance. I am Aubrey Hayes, USAT Level 1 coach, age group athlete, and co-founder of Precise Multisport.
I am Joshua Gordon, 11-time full Ironman finisher and co-founder of Precise Multisport.
All right, so today we are going to touch on how to fuel or properly fuel your race, and specifically touching on 70.3 in Ironman racing. Today, we're going to introduce a rule and some of the elements for in-race nutrition strategies that you can use. So Josh, take us away with what that rule is.
Sure thing. So I am going to pull all of this inspiration from when I used to work with Dr. Alex Harrison. He's a very popular guy. He invented the Saturday app. And I highly suggest you follow him and what he has to say. But basically, I tell all the people that I coach, it's a very simple thing. It's kind of like a moniker that I remember, the 4x1 rule. And so what I mean by this is it's kind of a simple equation, but it can be generalized pretty easily. I say for every 100 grams of carbs that you consume, you need at least 1 liter of fluid, 1 gram of sodium, and 100 milligrams of caffeine. So basically just those 4 things, and we're going to go into detail more, but they're all kind of multiples of 10 or 100 or 1. So I think this is those numbers will go in detail, but they're a good starting point. And that from there, you can try to optimize based on your physiology. If you're a high responder or low responder to certain things, like the conditions, and there's a lot of variables that go into this. But from a fundamental level, if you just followed that one piece of advice, 100 grams of carbs, 1 liter fluid, 1 gram of sodium, and 100 milligrams of caffeine, you're going to do really well with that.
This is just a baseline to start off of, and then you can start individualizing from there based on some of the elements we'll talk about. So we're going to talk about the 4 total elements, we're calling it. So adjusting for race length, nutrition periodization, the role of the environment of the race or the environment you're in, common mistakes and consequences, and then testing and tuning in training itself. But within that, there are some components that we're going to talk about with that, right? So you're talking about carbohydrates, fluids, sodium, and caffeine. So let's dive into those a little bit, like those recommended ranges, absorption limits, and things like that. So
for sure. So let's start with the most important of all the 4 things, right? You need to fuel both your workouts and your racing, right? And so, there's different amounts of absorption rates, and there's different ratios of glucose and fructose that people can handle. And the old conventional wisdom is that, you should consume 30 to 60 grams an hour. And that's kind of safe, right? But nowadays, I'm sure everyone has heard these crazy numbers people are pushing down. I've tried pretty high myself. 60 would be the bare minimum that I would suggest for a race situation, but pushing all the way up to maybe 140, right? So it's in the middle of that crazy range is 100. So I think that might be a high for a lot of people, but 100 grams of carbs of a 1 to 0.8 ratio, so glucose to fructose, that's kind of the number one ratio that people use nowadays. If you buy Morton products, they come with that ratio. And they say that ratio is best because there's a limit to the amount of glucose that you can absorb per hour, which is around 1 gram of glucose per minute or 60 grams of carbohydrates per minute. So if you want to go above that 60, you need to start increasing the amount of fructose. So if you increase the amount of fructose, you can actually take in more total carbohydrates. And the other cool thing is it's called, forget the exact name of it, but fructose consumption will allow you to actually absorb more glucose. So if you only had glucose, it would be limited. But if you start increasing the fructose, it actually allows you to absorb more glucose. And so that's how people get to these crazy numbers, 150 grams an hour or higher.
yeah.
And so, I would recommend 100 grams to most of the people that I coach for a 70.3 or Ironman distance race. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, 100%. And then with that, do you start them off at the bare minimum? Hey, we're going to start with 60 grams. And then as they're training, build them up each week. Hey, try to take in 70, adjust your fructose to glucose, things like that.
Totally. It really just depends on the person. I'll give you an example. My wife, she cannot handle any fructose whatsoever. I tried to get her to use pH gels or Morton, and she's like always having stomach problems, like stomach pains. So I was like, you should try this other product. You can. Have you heard of that one? It's
Yeah.
like
Oh,
pure, yeah,
yeah.
it's like pure glucose, right? And she can digest that no problem. So I think the safest thing to do if I would recommend someone start from nothing would be to start with like pure glucose, 60 grams an hour, and then start adding in fructose. And so an easy way to do that is basically table sugar. It's 50% glucose, 50% fructose. So you could just basically mix in sugar with some of these other products and get the exact ratio that you want. Maybe we can write a blog or something about this, but I mean, there's so much information out there. That's why I recommend Alex's Saturday app will like tell you how to do all of this stuff for
Okay.
yourself, or Fuel In, those other
Fueling. Yeah.
Fuel In. There's some things that do it, but you don't need all those things. You should just experiment. But yeah, start on the low end 60 and see how hard you can push it. And you'll know when it's going bad because you're gonna feel like you have to puke.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've had like I used my first races I used goo. I would
Mm,
never go back to those things. First of all, they're way too thick. And then I used the Cliff blocks and
hmm.
every time I took them in a long ride, I just felt like my stomach was in knots every
Yeah.
time. And then I started using pH and I've had zero issues with precision fuel and hydration products
Mm.
at all. So I'm just gonna stick to those for now. So when we talk about that, so you talk about carbohydrates and then taking in fluids and sodium and things of that nature. So fluid rate,
For sure.
I think is very important, but you can take in too much water and you can take in
Right.
too much salt, right? And really jack your GI up. So uh, kind of deep dive into how that fluid and sodium rates work out.
For sure. So, like in my experience, and I think the research backs this up, but I don't have it on hand. But like when you're taking in a little lesser amount of carbohydrates, let's just say 60 grams, like you can get away with taking in less fluid because that's just how the body can absorb it. But when you're pushing up high numbers, like 100 grams or more, then if you don't take enough fluid, that's when you get GI distress. So,
Mhm.
like when you have a high carbohydrate intake, you basically have to have enough fluid to go along with it. So, this goes beyond just hydrating for performance, preventing dehydration, right? It's like
Yeah.
a lot of people get into the mistake. They read some article, right, on triathlete, oh, 90 to 220 grams an hour. But they rarely mention in those articles that you need enough fluid. Otherwise, you're going to have GI distress. So the key is if you're going to have a high carbohydrate intake, you need a significant amount of water beyond just requirement for hydration purposes.
Yeah, and it's not like you said, not just for hydration, but just actually processing those carbohydrates.
Correct.
You're
Yeah.
putting all that into an empty gut, no fluids to mix with it, man, you're just yeah, you're setting yourself up for failure 100%.
Yeah, and that's where kind of sodium comes in, is because like you can kind of offset some of that with higher sodium content because it increases the blood plasma volume, right?
Mm,
you're retaining
protection.
more
Yeah.
water. And
Yeah.
so if you have like no sodium but a lot of carbs and a little water, I feel like that is a recipe for disaster. Or if you have two of those three things and not one of the other, right? It's also a recipe. If you have too much carbs and too much sodium but not enough water, like
Yeah.
you have problems, right? So that's where this nutrition, comes in, this balancing it, right? Because it's like a lot of people read an article or they listen to a podcast, they miss the trifecta of it. You can't have one without the other two to have an effective race nutrition strategy.
But with that, like, we're talking about when you talk about sodium, people may say, "How much sodium do I take?" So when you look at yourself, like there, I think there's a couple ways, and I know you have more of a scientific way of looking at it. But for me, it's like if you go for a run or a bike and you come back and you have little to no salt on your clothing, then you probably don't need to intake a whole lot of sodium. And it also could be based on the heat of the day as well. But if you come back and you're one of those people that are like caked in sodium, then you probably need to increase that amount of sodium that you're intaking, not just even during, but before and after those events. So that's how I kind of range it. I usually don't try to go over 15, 1600 milligrams an hour because that starts to become excessive. That's where I cap. I usually do 1500 milligrams an hour because I'm one of those people that just like soaked in salt at the end of every run.
Yeah.
What is what is a good way that you see to track sodium or how much people need to take?
I mean, I think like thirst is a good way beyond just like looking at your skin after. I mean, of course, you're caked in sodium, but you should be reaching for the bottle, like sodium promotes thirst. And so if you're having a problem taking it in, you're like, dang, how am I going to drink 1.5 liters of fluid an hour? Increase the amount of sodium. You should be wanting to drink the bottle, basically. The other thing is you could do based on how you feel. Like if you have too little sodium, like you might feel after the workout like kind of lightheaded. There could be some symptoms, right? So you should like experiment with that. We'll get into that more, but I
Yeah.
think it's safe to just choose like between 500 and 1500. And, people, there's a lot of fear mongering out there. Like daily recommended amount of sodium is like 2,400 milligrams, and
Yeah.
then you start Googling it. Like, oh, do athletes need more sodium? And you get all these articles being like, athletes don't need more sodium. And I'm just like, so I think
Yeah.
500 to 1,500 milligrams is safe for most people, and just, experiment with it. We'll get into that a little bit more.
I have this weird thing I have to confess. So like when I drink sodium or taking nutrients when I work out, I'm like, this is the spark to the muscle, and I just think of like electricity, like shocking,
Okay.
into the muscle and stuff because
Electrolytes? Yeah.
yeah, because it carries. I mean,
Hmm.
it carries energy. It helps retain, especially sodium helps retain that water to keep the muscles working and things like that. But it just this weird thing in my head. Yeah, there's some electricity going on in my body right now. Whatever.
If it
I just had
works.
to admit that. So with that, we're gonna add in caffeine now to our race nutrition, and
Hmm.
there's a lot of things out there like caffeine makes you cramp, or caffeine hurts your performance, or caffeine does everything for your performance, or I try to not drink caffeine a week prior to my race so the caffeine hits better. But when we talk about caffeine during race nutrition, what are we looking at?
It's optional. You don't have to take caffeine, and I've done many races without caffeine. There are considerations if you're doing a run only race. Sometimes like I don't want to take caffeine because the GI issue. So as you mentioned, caffeine people say because it's a diuretic. So that means it makes you have to go to the bathroom, whether it's pee or the other one. So it's like you have to drink enough water then. And that means you need enough sodium. So like you could probably not have any caffeine and be fine. But we're talking about like 70.3 or full or even a marathon. Like it really becomes more a performance enhancer, like if you're out there for longer. Or if it's a shorter race, like a Olympic or something, it kind of blunts the pain. They've shown that it reduces the RPE. So I mean, there's so many benefits of caffeine. It's one of the most studied performance enhancers that's out there. I think a long time ago it used to be banned. It was banned by WADA like 100 years ago or something because it
Wow.
was that good. But when I said 100 milligrams in my 4x1 rule, like I would not go more than like 100 milligrams per hour. There's some research out there, like you can go up to 3 milligrams per kilogram per hour. So for me, that'd be like a little over 200 milligrams. Sometimes I would maybe take 200 milligrams in once and then not take any for a few hours. But like
Hmm.
over the course of like, a 4 hour race, like I wouldn't take more than like 400 milligrams of caffeine. That's a common dosage if you get a Morton or a pH gel. It's like 100 milligrams of
Milligrams, yeah.
caffeine. Yeah. And so if I'm running a marathon, I would take like one of those per hour at most. I'm not going to take like every single gel to be caffeinated.
Yeah, I think for me, what's worked is I stick to the just the carb gels all the way up till half marathon, and then I take a caffeine every other time I take a gel from that point
Uh-huh.
on. So on the back half, but I try not to get like too like hyped up in the beginning with caffeine and then have one of those crashes. And I used to do that, and then that night after the race, I couldn't go to sleep because I was running on 400 or 500 milligrams of caffeine. It's like, oh my
Yeah.
God, yeah. So I
That's
had
the
to,
one downside of this approach is like I
yeah.
remember after a few of my Ironmans when I was really doing the caffeine, I could not sleep. You're all amped up and then
That
but
on top of the
yeah.
recovery and you're like sweating in your bed. Yeah. Oh, I
I
know.
always say the day after the Ironman, I feel really good. I could go do another workout, but it's 2 days later when you like to
Mm-hmm.
crash,
Yeah.
from all the carbs and caffeine and everything. It's the worst. That's like
Yeah, for
two
sure.
days later is the worst.
Because I'll like try
Yeah.
to go out and do a bike ride, you like spin the legs out and stuff, and then
Yeah.
like you said, like 2 or 3 days later, I'm like, I'm not doing anything. I'm out of it. Like I'm so spent. Yeah.
Exactly.
So
For sure.
all right, so we got a basis of the components. So when we say components, carbohydrates, fluid intake, sodium intake, and caffeine intake. So now let's look like how do we adjust this for our race length? And I kind of mentioned at the beginning, like sprint and Olympic, the fueling isn't as important. Not saying it's not important, but pre-race fueling is good. Are
Mhm.
you taking electrolytes the day before? Are you taking a sodium? How are you eating? The morning of that race? Are you taking a like most? I take in a caffeine gel before an Olympic or a sprint, the like 15 minutes before the swim, and then I may take a gel at the end of the bike just to
Mhm.
give me something to feed off of. But I don't really have like a huge fuel plan for sprint or Olympics. So jumping into those 70.3s and 140.6, what's that fuel plan look like, and how do we adjust?
Yeah. So like you said beforehand, that's a whole other topic. It's like carb loading and the day
Yeah.
beforehand. But like, um, I would actually personally for 70.3, it's shorter. So like I actually and the intensity is higher, right? So I take actually less grams of carbs per hour on a 70.3 than I do on a full distance triathlon because like you can't really absorb as many and you're not going to be out there for like as long, right? So I might only take, if you average it over the whole race, I might only take like 90 grams an hour, but like in an Ironman I might average like 110 or something, right?
Okay.
And so it's the same with fluid almost. Like I on 70.3, you get dehydrated at a certain rate, and the race will be ending. It depends how long you're out there. Of course, if you're out there for 7.5 hours, it becomes you need to take a lot more fluid, right? But like on the 70.3, I actually take significantly less fluid than I would in a 140.6 because like it's gonna be over sooner and like you're gonna, not be having to worry about becoming too dehydrated.
Yeah, I think so, and especially from 70.3 to full Ironman. So it's not as simple as taking 70.3 nutrition strategies and just doubling it. I
Mm.
think people probably, well, I'll just double it. Well, that's like you're saying, it could be intensity, could be time, that you have to weigh, and then environment, which we'll touch on in a little bit. But for like 70.3, for most people, they're at their threshold, so it's gonna be a little faster, a little peppier. You may be burning through carbs. So those 7 hour people, I think they need a fuel just like they're gonna do a full distance Ironman, honestly.
Yeah, yeah. The
Yeah,
longer
because
you're out
they're
there,
out
yeah,
there. But if you're
yeah.
like if you're competing and you're in the top, 10-15% of your age group, we're looking at like what, 5 hours and below,
Hmm.
maybe 5.5 hours and below. Yeah, I would take your strategy where it might not be as much carbs, but more of sodium intake and water intake is what you're gonna really thrive off of. So,
Yeah.
and
And
then
like
for that
one,
full
mhm.
distance, man, it really becomes important to train. I'm not saying you just shouldn't train your gut in 70.3, but training your gut in the full distance is definitely needed because we're looking at anywhere from, elite age groupers at like an 8.5 hour all the way up to people at 17 hours. So 17 hours of taking in nutrition.
Yeah,
I,
then
I
you need to
mean,
switch to like solids
yeah.
and such. When the longer you're out there, the more real food you should probably eat.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, one a full Ironman, like there's a lot of complexity with how do you carry all that nutrition. And like basically the key difference is like I'll just say it like I like over concentrate my bottles. So if I carry 3 bottles, I'll put like 200 grams of carbs per bottle for like, an under 5 hour bike split. So like then you have to take in all the rest of the fluid has to be coming from like water. Like because like if I start drinking from my bottle and it's like 200 grams of carbs in an 800 milliliter bottle, that's a 25% solution.
Hmm.
And that bottle could have multiple grams of sodium. I can't just drink it like it's a normal Gatorade, right? And so then you have to start like iterating between your nutrition sodium bottle and water. And so there's like it's kind of like a balancing act that you have to really figure out for yourself. Like other people, they'll go like pure gels or something. They'll fill a bottle with just like 500 grams of carbs. And it's
Yeah.
like, you know, and so it comes back to like, we'll talk about how to experiment and check it out for yourself. But fueling for 70.3 you have a much more higher art margin for air. So that's why a lot of people can get away with like never really figuring it out. And that's why a lot of the reason why jumping up from like 70.3 to full, it's a totally different ball game. And because a lot of people just never master how to fuel properly. Or they bonk. You have a lot of pros that are really good at 70.3, but they cannot do a full Ironman because they just burn through all their carbs and they can't ever, absorb additional nutrition.
Hmm.
Yeah, so when you're in the race itself, let's say, it doesn't really matter. This will hold between 70.3 and full Ironman. Basically, how do you distribute your carbohydrates and your sodium and so forth? at different portions of the race. Let's just walk through it from the like 15 minutes before to the end of the race. So right before the race, what I would do is have a gel. I usually have like a caffeinated gel or Red Bull or something within the last 15 minutes before the swim because you're not going to be having anything in the swim.
Yeah, of
And I hear
course.
all
Yeah.
these questions like, oh, some people should I carry a gel in the swim and eat it? I've heard that from multiple people. Have you
No
heard that
way.
before?
No.
Okay.
That can't be like, what are you gonna, I mean, the long distance swimmers do that. They'll like turn over on their back and they have a support canoe and they hand them a bottle
Yeah,
and they're drinking and swimming, but
I would
you
say
don't have
don't
that
do
out
that.
there. Yeah, don't
You
be the
could
guy
just
that's
like
like
put it in your
rips the gel out.
sleeve.
Yeah.
Yeah, put it in your sleeve and then just like
Maybe you should try it. Just tell us how it goes.
swimming's already yeah, enough. But yeah, then after the swim in the bike is when I would take most of the nutrition for the race because there's a few reasons for that. One, it's easiest because you have the most control. You have your bottles. I mean, some of my I think I can carry like 3 or 4 liters of water on my bike depending on the setup that I'm using that day, right? And so
Mhm.
you know exactly what's in each bottle, how much sodium, caffeine, carbs, and then it gives you full control and then you're not pounding, you're not jostling, your stomach's not moving up and down as much. So you should plan to take more carbs per hour on the bike than you should on the run. And this goes back to the original 4x1 rule is because on the run, not only are you having this loading force of jumping up and
Yeah.
down, but you're not able to consume as much fluid unless you're like carrying a camelback, which I would really recommend. You
Mhm.
can't really take in a liter of water, right? Like so if you're gonna have a lower carbohydrate intake on the run than you would on the bike because like simply you cannot consume enough fluid to balance that out without having some risk of GI distress for the average person. Like you could probably train it. Yeah, I take 90 grams of carbs an hour on the run, but like if I try to take 120, I have to be taking like you see that in like Ironman Texas or whatever. They take all the cups, like 10
Yeah.
cups, you know?
Like
Like you see
assembly.
Christian
Yeah.
Blumenfeld running through, it's like because he can't if he's taking 120 grams of carbs an hour, he needs over a liter of fluid to balance that out. Otherwise, he's gonna have stomach
Taking
problems. And he's
taking
had a
a
lot of
leader
stomach
to the
problems.
face at every aid station.
You see the face of the volunteers. I watched was that St. George yesterday?
Yeah, yeah.
Some of the face of the volunteers, you could see the guys were like, and they were just like, "You took all my cups." They were
Oh
just,
no.
yeah.
Well, stop
So
using little bitty like Dixie cup
I hate
mouthwash
that.
cups, you know?
I hate
Like
that.
I'm
Yeah.
not trying to wash out my mouth after brushing my teeth, man. I'm trying to take in some fluids here.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so with the jostling piece, 100%, man.
We've
I
experienced that
think
before.
most people experience the
Mm.
most GI distress on that run, and it could be a multitude of things, but like you said, taking all those fluids, taking your carbs on the bike and salt or and sodium as well. Like you said, mix those bottles, and then that way when you get on the run, you're kind of managing at that point. A little bit of water, maybe some carbs
Yeah.
here, but yeah, when you're trying to like shove down multiple gels and carbs and everything on the run, you're gonna be bending over at like mile 15, hurting.
Yeah.
I've seen it 100 times, man.
Yeah.
Like dudes just like, oh, and then
Yeah.
when I was in Ironman Tulsa, I saw this lady. Her coach was there walking on the because it was just a back and forth on this rope path, and her coach is there is like, he's like, "Are you okay?" And she was like, "My stomach hurts. I told you it wouldn't work." And he was like, "Well, you messed up your nutrition plan." He was yelling at her at mile 16. Like, I was dying. I was like, "Oh man, I hope that's not me." And literally at mile 19, I'm like, "Oh my God." Like,
Let me say exactly what I do for an Ironman because it might be of interest to somebody because I've had some pretty good runs.
okay.
I've never had like stomach issues in a run. So like it changes all the time because they've changed the course, like they
Yeah.
used to have Gatorade, now they don't. So I'll just tell you exactly what I'm gonna do for my next race. I don't know what they're gonna have in Roth, but let's say what I did in Arizona or Kona or something. Basically at every aid station, I will take 2 glasses of water and one of those like mortal cups that they have. So like I
Okay.
go face, I throw the water just like those guys in the
Yeah. Yeah.
pros, right? And then I take like mortal and I drink it, and then I put more as much water as possible on my face and my head. And then what I do is I also carry we in our kit we have those pockets, or I have a race triathlon belt. I try to take one 30-gram gel, like for me, every 20 minutes. So it's not by distance, it's because like there could be hills, There could be heat, I want to get 20 grams, 30 grams of carbs every 20 minutes. And that's been fine for me. And then what I'll do is I'll take one caffeinated gel every hour. So I'll have some of my gels will be like, I'll carry 3 caffeinated gels or I'll take the on-course one. And so basically I try to take as much water as possible. And then I know exactly I'm getting 90 grams of carbs from my gels. So I don't have to like worry about getting calories at the aid station. It's just fluid and sodium. So
Okay.
it
Nice.
works. Yeah.
Yeah, man, that's good. So hopefully everybody could take that. And then one of the key things that you mentioned there was talking about hills, and then you also mentioned kind of
Mm.
your environment. So I would consider terrain being part of your environment, but specifically talking about heat, humidity, could be cold, altitude
Yeah.
increases, things like that. So one of the big things that you should definitely be looking at as you lead into your race is what time of the year it is, what the average temps are. If you look at Ironman, they give you kind of the averages. Is it going to be a hot swim? Is it going to be a hot run, especially looking depending on what time you're planning on racing. As you get closer, you can look at, all right, I'm going to be on the run at this point and there's no shade on this run. So I'm going to be in full sun, or hey, by this point during the bike, it's going to start hitting 80, 85 degrees. And so basing your fueling plan and hydration off of that. And one of the big key things that I would tell people is we talk about being proactive with this is don't wait till it gets hot to
Mm.
hydrate properly, right? So like you talked about preparing on the bike prior to taking in all your nutrition on the bike, you should be doing the same thing. If I know it's going to be a hot day the next day, it all starts the day before, 2 days
Mm.
before with hydration, with sodium intake. And then the day of, as soon as I get out of the swim, I'm immediately being conscious of taking in fluids and taking in my nutrition so I can beat the heat later on in the day. What are some key things that you do to look at that?
I think you just hit the nail on the head. I mean, it's training in the heat is important for racing in the heat, right?
Yeah.
Like knowing exactly how much fluid you could intake and how much you're going to sweat, all those sweat tests, and
Yeah.
then like there's actually a hot race versus a cold race. They both present their own unique challenges. Like if it's cold, it's very hard to drink enough fluid because
Mm.
then you have that problem because you can't take enough fluid because then you're peeing all the time. So you need more
Yeah.
sodium, right? And so I think if you have a race that's on either side of the spectrum, really hot or really cold, you need to specifically train for that and prepare for that and have a very tailored strategy. And so you need to do your own research, I would say. What I said in the beginning is kind of the general rule, but you have to tweak those knobs, for hot or cold. And that's going to be like down to experimentation and then your own physiology.
Yeah, how your body reacts. And that should come into play when you choose your race. I don't choose hot races because I know I
Yeah.
will struggle. So I race the beginning of the season, like February, March, April, and
Mhm.
then at the end of the season, closer to October, because the hot races just destroy me. We've done a couple hot races, and yeah, man, it's tough on me every time. And so maybe it's just I need to take my own advice here and work a little bit more with some heat work and things like that. So I know.
Sure.
So, all right. So we know the role in the environment, nutrition periodization, adjusting for that race length. So how about those common mistakes and the
Mm.
consequences that come from common mistakes?
Yeah, I mean, we've probably both seen them all, but
Yeah.
like the common mistakes, the first one is pretty dire, and you don't want to do this because people do die, right? You see this like on the news sometimes, hyponatremia. So that happens when you just don't have enough sodium for the amount of fluid that you consume, right? So it's not only about taking in liquid, it's you have to combine sodium with liquid especially if you're taking in a lot of liquid. And that can manifest itself in not dire ways, like you'll be okay, but you'll just feel bad. And that's what happens to most people, I would say. And then it could be also like deadly. So don't
Mm.
mess around with that.
Yep.
The other really common thing that I've seen is, people are so focused on getting enough carbs. They hear or they read, I already said this, but they just aren't able, they just only have like gels and they don't have enough water. Say it's like a cold race or something. And then they're like, why does my stomach hurt at like mile 15 in Ironman?
Yeah.
It's because like they're just like so focused on, I ate all these calories. I ate all these calories. Oh, what about the other salt in the water part?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then they have stomach problems. Those are the two main ones. I mean, then the other kind of things are like ignoring the opportunity to use caffeine. I remember in one of my early races in my career, I got super tired, like sleepy as the sun was kind of going down at the end of an Ironman.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
like, I need caffeine. I didn't know any better back then. And then the last probably obvious one is to practice,
Mm.
right? Like,
Yeah.
don't start taking Morton gels because they're offering them on the course if you've never tried a Morton gel. or all these other things that we're talking about, right? You don't
Yeah.
just like start taking 100 milligrams of caffeine per hour if you've never taken 5 milligrams of caffeine per hour. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to talk on the caffeine piece real quick. So like neglecting kind of that, like you were saying, being tired. A good substitute for most races will have Coke on the like Coca-Cola on the course. A good substitute if you're not trying to take in more carb gels, but you're just looking for a quick hit. Like a cold Coke 5, 6 hours into the race is like, I don't know, it's amazing. Nobody could tell me any different.
Is
And
it flat? The
no,
flat
man,
Coke just full
no,
of
no,
bubbles and
just
everything?
oh yeah, it's amazing. And then
Okay.
what what race was I at? I can't remember, but they had RC Cola. I was like, I'm not drinking that. I want Coke. I paid so much money for this race. I want Coca-Cola, not RC Coke. But yeah, so that is a good substitute if you're like, man, I can't take another gel. Find those. It's usually
Yeah.
in the run on an Ironman. Some marathons do it, some don't. And then when you talked about not gut training in advance, so that kind of jumps into our next element, which is testing and tuning in training. So gut training comes from that testing and tuning piece. And something you mentioned about like don't take Morton gels on the course if you've never taken Morton gels. Well, guys, Ironman and all these races put out who their nutrition sponsors are prior to. So if you're one of those people like I don't want to carry stuff on me, I don't really know how to deal with it, then practice using what's on the course leading up to the race and not the week before. That's not gut training. You need to do that in advance. So yeah, let's. That's my biggest piece on gut training for like nutrition on a course. So what do you think about like testing and tuning in training?
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about some of this in one of the previous episodes, but there should be some minimum amount of fueling for every session, pretty much every normal workout. But there will be key workouts in any good plan that are race simulation workouts.
Yeah.
Your big peak week, peak days, if you're doing a 70.3, it's like a 3.5 hour ride with intensity, or an Ironman, it's like 100 plus miles, right? Those are the days that you need to fuel exactly like you're going to fuel in the race. That's your chance.
Yeah.
And then I promise you will be grateful that you did, because you're going to see what worked, what didn't work. And maybe you're taking too many carbs. Maybe you could take even more carbs. Maybe by the fifth hour of your ride, you're like, this drink that I bought tastes horrible, right? And so you
Yeah.
have to practice. I know it's blasphemy to say that you need to practice. Most
Yeah.
likely you should be practicing this outside, also, as we talked about, with wind and how you're going to drink from the bottle when you're tucked down,
Yeah.
because like your stomach could get messed up when you're in TT position. That's a whole other topic. But you need to practice in this situation that you're going to be in, right, for various reasons.
Yeah. Like
And
100%.
so, yeah,
Yeah, like where you put your bottles, where you put your nutrition. Can you actually reach it in arrow, or do you have to come up and become a wind cell
right.
and slow yourself down to take drinks? Are you comfortable actually drinking while riding? Yeah, there's
Yeah,
a
when I
lot
was
of
in
testing.
Galveston, I wasn't, because it was like a 25-mile-an-hour crosswind,
Yeah.
and I didn't, and I was like, I didn't want to even like get up an inch, So what I did, I adapted in the moment. It was cold, and I just started taking Morton gels, because it was going to be like 25 grams every time, and I wouldn't have to like lift the bottle, because it was just every time I lifted up, it was like massive crosswind. So
Hmm.
those kind of things you can figure out if you're experienced, but if you're inexperienced, you have to try it, and then you have to see, okay, the sodium, the carbs, the caffeine, how much fluid can I take? If it's hot, it's cold. So basically, like, you can just do experimental design like we do in statistics. Say, okay, I'm going to try this workout. These are the parameters. Next workout, I'll try to increase the amount of carbs, decrease the amount of sodium, etc. Kind of get a matrix, of
Hmm.
how it felt and how you felt the day after, etc. So, I mean, it sounds like a lot, and it is, but if you're serious about it, I mean, you can just be methodical about like a scientific method kind of thing, and then optimize it. And there's stuff out there like that app, Saturday app, they can do it for you, or you can talk to us. We
Yeah.
can help you do it for sure.
Yeah, we can help you as well. All day. So, with that being the last of the five elements that we talked about, let's get some final takeaways on what we talked about today, on that 4x1 rule and go from there.
Yeah. So just to recap it and summarize, basically the rule is 100 grams of carbs, 1 liter of fluid, 1 gram of sodium, and 100 milligrams of caffeine. And if you do that, you're most likely going to be having a very good nutrition strategy. And of course, you can tweak it beyond that. But if you just take one thing from this episode, it's to, try, get a baseline to try it and then start tweaking it for yourself from there.
Okay. Yeah, and I like one thing that you said before, and we hear this a lot. No plan survives contact with race day, or everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. So it's the same thing. We use the same concept. I believe everybody uses it, but same concept in the military. No plan, last past first contact. But the framework builds you that base for what it's going to be, and then you can always adjust from there. But practicing in different conditions is what is going to make you resilient against those changes on race day. Oh, okay, I've been through this. Here's how I change this. Okay, this isn't going how I planned, but like you did with the Morts and gels, like I could take on other nutrition. Knowing what you need every hour is the most important thing, because in most of these races are going to be supported, and you're going to be able to find the nutrition that you need, like 100%, or over plan sometimes. Hey, I'm going to shove a couple extra gels in here, or I'm going to have another bottle at transition just in case I lost some nutrition on the bike somewhere. I can take some, in T2 leading into the run. I always have an extra bottle that I take with me the first like 10 minutes, a throwaway bottle on the run, so I can get a little nutrition in at the beginning of the run and move out. So yeah, 100% using this as a base to build on your nutrition for race day.
Sounds great. Yeah. So the final thought about this is that fueling isn't about perfection. It's about preparation, pattern recognition, and personalization. The rules that we talked about today are just to get you started. And so, yeah, if you want to get a more tailored plan, like please feel free to reach out to us, and we're happy to help you out with that.
And then I'd like to add that our partner, Precision Fuel and Hydration, also does an online sweat test. You go on, you answer some questions about how you sweat, what your race plan is, what your goals, and then it'll spit out essentially an IA-generated nutrition plan for your race day. And then you could take that, apply it to this 4x1 rule, and adjust it to your needs. So I wouldn't say go on there and buy every item that it tells you need to buy. You probably need to test some of those products out, but it's a good deal. And then they also have locations across the world that they do the actual sweat test at, so you can go there and get a sweat test done. So highly recommend Precision Fuel and Hydration, and they've been great for both of us, and we use them during race day. So with that, under this podcast, there's a button that says text here. Send us any questions you need from there. If you want to reach out to us at our website, you can submit questions at precisemultisport@gmail.com or precisemultisport.com/contact us. Yeah. As well, make sure you click the follow button, and we're always taking on new athletes. So reach out, and thank you guys for joining us today. I hope you got some good key points for nutrition during race day, and that you're able to apply these to your training and future races. Have a good one.